Almighty God, Lord, we thank you and praise you. It's midweek, and we just thank you for the time that and the tools that you've provided, that we can come together, and what you've laid upon our heart to come together and be able to study and grow in truth and understanding. As you continue to shed light with the midnight cry looking behind us, that it's the light that shines on the path all along, that we're beginning to see more and more clearly the issues of the Sunday law. There's still a lot of clarity to be determined and to be understood. We just pray for our leaders. We pray for Elder Tess, and that he would guide and direct each and every one. We thank you, and we ask you for your presence to be with us tonight as we continue our review and learning to just solidify the waymarks in our own hearts and minds, that we would be able to defend the waymarks as we work our way through towards in all the review with the midnight cry message. We thank you and we praise you, and we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so I'm going to pull up not that one, this one, and see who would like to go first to summarize what we're working on. For fill-in, because I said I was going to say this and I didn't, for Mary and anybody else, that I think everybody else knows what we're doing, but we're working on the review of the waymarks, and right now we're on 9/11. We've gone through a couple presentations, and Mary, some of it, depending on what your studies with Aaron have been, I think a lot of people are going through these notes as well, some of them in their classes. So we're reviewing the events, the 12 events that that marked 9/11 as the second waymark. And so far we've gone through the Millerites, and then looking at the end of ancient Israel. So if somebody would like to jump in and tell us our first, review our first study of what marks 9/11 as the second waymark. Anybody? Need to review? Let me remind us here. The first article that we went through was the four winds being restrained, if that helps somebody get jump started. The four winds were restrained at the third woe. Anybody want to try to go through that? Now, remember, we were all warned we were going to be interactive.
And so the four winds that were restrained, the four winds represent Islam, and they were restrained on August 11th, 1840, at the Millerite time. And they were restrained on November 9th, 2001, our time.
What else do you remember for that waymark to be the second, to make 9/11 to be our second waymark?
It was the empowering of the first angel.
Okay, and how?
The methodology that was used from Miller's time was the year date principle that was confirmed by Josiah Litch. And that was the Millerite time. And our methodology, the line upon line, which Elder Pippinger in 1989, starting from 89, was teaching, was confirmed in 2001.
Anything else? Anybody else want to, anybody have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think when you take the 9/11 and you put it like, especially you look at the line of Christ, we see that 27 AD was baptism and Christ was confirmed to be this the leader that was preached by John. And then when you take it to the agricultural model, we see that 9/11 is the early rain. And then we see also the attack of the Islam attacking the US in, no, I mean September 11. I don't know that's the correct date. I think Phil said, oh, half of it. I'm not sure whether that is it. By the way, Elaine explained it sometime. She explained it really well. Yeah, I think I don't have much to say. If anybody have better understanding, can come up.
That's a good start. Anybody else? Okay, so what Phil touched on was the Millerite line, and Sarah touched on the end of ancient Israel. On the Millerite line, you have the first angel at 1798, marked, and it's the time of the end, which we saw as well in this line here of Adventism and the Great Controversy. These 5 waymarks Ellen White gives us. She gives us 1798 is the time of the end. We get October 22nd, 1844 as the second waymark. And then Sunday law, close of probation, and the second advent. So those 5 she gives us so that we have the structure to work with. So when we come down to our line, we can bring down the Sunday law, close of probation, Daniel 12:1, and the second advent. But these 2 waymarks we don't have. So they come from formulated or manufactured, however you want to put it, from our current dispensation. So in 1989, you have the methodology of line upon line opening up, which leads to an increase of knowledge, and then the formalization, which was Daniel 11, 11:40 to 45, and that teaching that the Sunday law is imminent. And so the methodology used was line upon line. And as Phil said, that in the Millerite history, the methodology that William Miller used was a day equals a year in Bible prophecy. Josiah Litch used the same methodology to go to Revelation 9. And in the history of the 5th and 6th trumpet, and go ahead, you gonna say something?
I think I phrased it by mistake.
Okay. Okay. So the 5th and 6th trumpet and the 1st and 2nd woes, he takes those prophetic periods and uses the day equals a year, and looking at the history of the second woe, I think I have that right. And yeah, second woe, and calculates the day, the hour, the day, the month, and the year to 391 years and 15 days, using a day equals a year in Bible prophecy. So with that, in 1838, he predicts that sometime in 1840, I think he says August 1840, but he says in 1840 that that the Ottoman Empire would be restrained. And so 10 days before the event, I believe it was August 1, he predicts that it would be August 11th. So on the very day, August 11th is when that happened. And some of the history, we went through that as well. Also in the Great Controversy, that Ellen White writes in there that on the very day it was fulfilled. So we know that they didn't have the tools and technology we do today to be able to have such information overnight. So it's not that they had the information overnight, but when it did, because here's this stirring back here in these, with you got the Second Great Awakening going on, and you've got the interest in the rising interest in Daniel and Revelation, and then you have William Miller predicting, using a day equals a year to predict 2,300 days, the end of the 2,300 days. So Josiah Litch uses that same methodology. And at that time, when this happens on the very day, then the methodology for this dispensation is confirmed, which empowers the second angel's, which empowers the first angel's message and then marks the arrival of the second. So there are several things going on here in the Millerite line with this that help us to have 9/11 as our waymark, because also in the woe, in the woes, we take the triple application of Bible prophecy. The first woe plus the second woe equals the third woe. And then in the first woe, they were to hurt the armies of Rome. Islam was to hurt the armies of Rome. And in the second woe, they're to kill. So on 9/11, we saw the armies of Rome, which is the United States, the chariots and horses that are the army of Rome, that that Islam strikes Rome's army, which is the United States. So then after that, on November 9, as Phil mentioned, you see a restraint of Islam. So this puts some of the witnesses, begins to put the witnesses here that 9/11 is the second waymark. And then we did look at what Sarah touched on, the end of ancient Israel, that you have, I hope I can remember all of this one here. You have the baptism, but I want to remember how it's the methodology. And I'm drawing a blank here, so somebody have to help me out if they can. But because God, when at the baptism, God speaks and says, "This is my son." And so God himself, God confirms the message here at 27 AD. You've got the baptism. You also see at 27 AD, you see that the leadership has passed by. So you have down here that Daniel opened up, and this is presented to Daniel 11:40, opened up and saying that the Sunday law is imminent. You have the fall of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union, recognizing the message of the King of the North and the King of the South here, and the SDA leadership rejects it. And up here in this history, ancient Israel, you also have where the leadership had rejected the message and rejects Jesus. So you have the leadership pass by, then you're going to have the disciples chosen and form a new church. So there's a new church, therefore there's a covenant. God's entering into a covenant with a new church here as well. And I think I'm missing one or two things here. I think that covers a good part of it. Anybody can remember anything that I missed, if that triggered any minds? No? Okay, then we will proceed. Let's see, the first angel's message was empowered and the second angel's message arrived as they are being repeated at the end of the world. God enters into a covenant with his people, and we just talked about that, after he proved line upon line. And the SDA leadership has passed by. Okay, so the next article we're going to go into is going to cover us with the early rain for the 144,000. The precursor to the angel of Revelation 18, 1-3 arrived. This is not to be mistaken with the angel of Revelation 18, 1-3 at the Sunday law, when his message is empowered and ready to swell to a loud cry in verse 4. The record-taking aspect of the judgment of the living for the 144,000 began, and the sealing of the 144,000 began. Okay, so we'll go over to, you can see article part 3 now, right?
Yes.
Okay, is it big enough for everybody?
Is it too small for anyone?
It's good for me.
Okay. Anybody else, just speak up and I'll enlarge it a little bit more. So this is 9/11 part 3, the early and latter reign, the judgment of the living, and the sealing of the 144,000. And we'll refer back and forth to our chart as we go through this throughout the course of the studies. Okay, so we've seen how every reform line has 5 major waymarks: the hand of God, the 5 fingers of God, the 5 fingers. The first 3 are the first, second, and third angels' messages. So the first 3 are the first, second, and third angels' messages, respectively, followed by the shut door and the second advent. In the line of the 144,000, Ellen White already gives you the last 3. She gives you Sunday law, close of probation, and second advent, those being Sunday law. Yeah, okay. So, so we are left to fabricate the first 2 waymarks for ourselves. And the purpose of this series is to identify the second waymark. We've already suggested it's 9/11 as it lines up with August 11th, 1840 and 27 AD. Those first 2, the first article and the second article that we went through and what we just reviewed. So this paper will incorporate the agricultural model to try and understand the relationship of the early and latter reign with 9/11, and then how the judgment of the living and the sealing of the 144,000 relates to this. So the early reign for the 144,000. The early and latter reign are symbols borrowed from the agricultural model. If you refer back to the diagram of the lines in the first article, it is easy to see how the second waymark for the 144,000, 9/11, lines up with the second stage of the agricultural model, the early reign. So we'll go back there real quick, and you see the agricultural model. You have the plowing, the former rain, the latter rain, and harvest. So you have a reform line. You have the 5 main waymarks with 4 dispensations. So you carry the former rain down here, and you're going to see the former rain here in this period here. And remember, we're looking at the big line, not the fractals, the 144,000 line, not the fractals. Okay. It cannot be the waymark prior to 9/11, as 1989 is the plowing. The field has to be plowed before the seed can be planted and receive the first rain or early rain, Deuteronomy 11:14. So 1989 is the first waymark, which corresponds to the plowing, not the early rain. Equally, the early rain cannot begin at the third waymark, as this is always the Sunday law, and Ellen White clearly says the latter rain, not the early rain, begins at the Sunday law. So we have, hold on a second. So we have no other option but to place the beginning of the early rain for the 144,000 at the second waymark. The beginning of the early reign of the 144,000 at the second waymark, which thus far we have shown to be 9/11 and the arrival of the second angel's message. Because he's already pointed out that the first 3 waymarks are the first, second, and third angel. And on the 144,000 line, that's 1989, 9/11, Sunday law. So then from 9/11, it must be that the wheat and the tares are planted. As in the East, the former rain falls at the sowing time, Testimonies to Ministers, 506, paragraph 1. For a seed is to be planted, it has to be first buried in the soil, to later arise up out of the ground. This process symbolizes baptism, which complements our model perfectly, as we have already placed the baptism of Christ at this exact waymark. Furthermore, the Red Sea crossing is the second waymark for the beginning of ancient Israel, which also parallels baptism, 1 Corinthians 10, 1-2. Then as the plant receives the early rain, it continues to grow. Rain is a symbol of the messages, doctrines, or words of God. And that's Great Controversy 341.4, Review and Herald, July 20, 1987, paragraph 6, Deuteronomy 32:2, Isaiah 28, 9-12, and 55, 10-12. So with each new message, the 144,000 are growing toward full maturity. When they accept the message of 9/11 and the third woe, they are declared perfect at that stage of growth. Then one by one, as they accept the messages of the 2520, 126 time setting, Raphia, Panium, the midnight cry, and equality, they are found perfect at each stage of the growth. This parallels the post-baptismal Christian walk, which should be one of perfection, Romans 6:6. As they grow from doctrine to doctrine, they are settling into the truth and intellectually and spiritually being restored to Eden. So it's a work of progress, and I wanted to go flip back to, if Christine, if you by chance want to pull up and I can unshare that we can read a few of these if you want. I don't know if you are able to. But we're going to go back here real quick just to
You're
look.
talking about bring up the quotes,
Yeah,
the LMI quotes. Okay.
so that we can read them. So looking at the chart again, you've got the beginning of ancient Israel, and the Red Sea crossing is their second waymark. You've got 27 AD is the end of ancient Israel, marking the baptism. And then you got August 11th, 1840 and 9/11. So just, he mentioned this one, so I thought I'd pull back the chart again. So you have the Red Sea crossing as the second waymark again for the beginning of ancient Israel. And tell me when you're ready and I'll go ahead and open it. So this is the quotes that you're looking for. If you don't have to get them all, but if you get a couple of them, we'll go through them. So rain is a symbol of the messages, doctrines, or words of God, and that's what we want to look at.
Could you point to them again?
Huh?
Could you point to them again? Just starting at the rain, is that you're talking about right there? Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. So with each new message, the 144,000 are growing toward full maturity. So perfect when at every stage. When they accept the message of 9/11 and the third woe, and why do we say it's the third woe while she's looking that up? Why do we say 9/11 is the third woe then? Anybody?
The restraint of Islam.
Yeah, can you be a little more fine-tuned on that?
First woe was Islam, second woe was Islam. So 1 + 2 = 3. So third woe has to be Islam.
Okay, that's what I was looking for. Thank you, both of you. Just want to make sure that when we're called upon to defend these things, we can stand on 2 legs or 3. Are you ready, Christine, for something? With something?
Ready with the first one.
Okay. Go ahead.
So the first one is the Great Controversy 341.4. To John were open scenes of deep and thrilling interest in the experience of the church. He saw the position, dangers, conflicts, and final deliverance of the people of God. He records the closing messages, which are to ripen the harvest of the earth, either as sheaves for the heavenly garner or as faggots for the fires of destruction. Subjects of vast importance were revealed to him, especially for the last church, that those who should turn from error to truth might be instructed concerning the perils and conflicts before them. None need be in darkness in regard to what is coming upon the earth.
Review and Herald, July 20, 1897. So just to reflect again, we're looking at rain is a symbol of the messages. We see that the closing messages are to ripen the harvest, and what agriculturally ripens the harvest.
I can't find it now with the search.
I don't know how to do that either, but if you scroll, you know how to get there, right? You close off all the books, go to, yeah, there you go. I've never been fast in here either.
Yeah, Review and Herald's not a fast one. That's not it.
1897. Yeah, 1897, July 20.
Right.
And paragraph 6.
That would be this one. The anointed ones standing by the Lord of the whole earth. Is that right? The anointed ones standing by the Lord of the whole earth have the position once given to Satan as covering the cherub, as covering cherub. That's the position. By the holy beings surrounding his throne, the Lord keeps up a constant communication with the inhabitants of the earth. The golden oil represents the grace with which God keeps the lamps of believers supplied, that they shall not flicker and go out. Were it not that this holy oil is poured from heaven in the messages of God's Spirit, the agencies of evil would have entire control over man.
That adds oil into it as well, being poured from heaven.
Mm.
Deuteronomy 32:2. I used to recite this one by heart. Yeah.
Yeah.
Been a long time.
Deuteronomy 32:2. My doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass.
What's that saying?
My message will be given to all.
I thought, but what, yes, and doctrine is the word and speech is the word. It's going to be the dew and the rain. So you have, what is that? What does that suggest? The dew and the rain.
The early rain and the latter rain.
Right. And then you have the small rain and then you have showers. So it's giving you the early rain and the latter rain.
It sounds like they're repeating in the large. Right?
Yeah. Or, yeah, yeah. Okay, and then Isaiah 28:9-12.
Okay. Whom shall he teach knowledge? And whom shall he make to understand doctrine? Them that are weaned from the milk and drawn from the breast. For precept must be upon precept, precept upon precept, line upon line, line upon line, here a little and there a little. For with stammering lips and another tongue will he speak to his people, to whom he said, this is the rest wherewith ye may cause the weary to rest, and this is the refreshing, yet they would not hear.
So where's the rain in that verse?
So where he's teaching the knowledge and the doctrine?
Yeah, in the last verse.
Oh, okay. So precept upon precept. The refreshing?
Right. It doesn't say it there, but we know that from other verses, that the refreshing. This is the rest. That's really interesting when, because people grow weary on the journey. And this is saying that the rain gives you rest from your weariness. Let's see, this is the rest wherewith ye may cause the weary to rest. This and this is the refreshing. Thank you. We'll skip that last one.
I don't know if this is appropriate, but it reminds me of, like those people who don't understand God, what's happening with all the things in the world. And, they've been taught that God doesn't love homosexual people and stuff like that. But if we were to give, when we give our message of God's love and gender, those people that are weary because they don't understand will have that type of rest. That's the way I see it. That gives them that hope, that rest in Christ. I might be saying that wrong.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll go back here. I don't know why it went back to the beginning here. Okay. Okay, so the latter rain. Ellen White gives us the empowerment, and we must dig to discover the arrival. First, let us be very clear. Ellen White tells us that the latter rain, judgment of the living, and sealing of the 144,000 all take place at the Sunday law. So she tells us the latter rain, judgment of the living, and the sealing of the 144,000 all take place at the Sunday law waymark. Revelation 18:1-3 is the Sunday law waymark when the second angel's message is empowered. And that's 603, Great Controversy 603, paragraph 1. Verse 4 onward is the loud cry under the latter rain. So as we now investigate the message of Revelation 18, please keep in mind that we are equally discussing the latter rain as they are almost synonymous. Let's see. So we investigate the message of Revelation 18. So verse 4 onward is the loud cry under the latter rain. So the latter rain and the loud cry, if I'm understanding correctly, are synonymous. Is that correct? I pulled up the wrong file.
Repeat the question. What in the latter rain? The minute cry?
The latter rain and the loud cry. I want to go back here. There we go. I was on the wrong one. So if I understood correctly, so firstly, let us be clear. Ellen White tells us that the latter rain, that's one thing. Judgment of the living, that's two things. And the sealing of the 144,000, three things take place. Latter rain, judgment of the living, and 144,000 take place at the Sunday law waymark. And so we're looking at the Sunday law waymark. Go on our line, the Sunday law waymark. She gives us that the latter rain, the judgment of the living, and the sealing of the 144,000 are here at the Sunday law waymark. So Revelation 18:1-3 is the Sunday law waymark when the second angel's message is empowered. And that's Great Controversy 603:1. And verse 4 onward is the loud cry under the latter rain. So as we now investigate the message of Revelation 18, please keep in mind that we are equally discussing the latter rain, as they are almost synonymous. The second angel's message arrived in history in the Millerite time, given as Revelation 14:8, but when it repeats at the end of the world, it is given as Revelation 18. That's Last Day Events 199. In the last article, we saw that the three angels first fly in the midst of heaven, signifying their arrival. So the three angels are flying in the midst of heaven, and that's when they arrive. And when they land on the earth, that's their empowerment. So the three angels, when they're flying in the midst of heaven, that's their arrival. And when they land on earth, that's their empowerment. In the same way, when the second angel arrived in history, the first stage was the arrival in the summer of 1844. And that's the Great Controversy 389, paragraph 2. And the second stage was the empowerment by Samuel Snow's Midnight Cry on August 14th, 1844. So please keep in mind an important distinction. This is how the second angel's message arrived for the Millerite line. For the line of the 144,000, the second angel arrives at 9/11 and is empowered at the Sunday Law Waymark. So for the 144,000, the second angel arrives at 9/11 and is empowered at the Sunday Law Waymark. Second angel arrives and second angel's empowered. So what was the distinction between arrival and empowered? Anybody?
Arrives, it flies in the midst of the air, empowered, it lands.
It lands, okay.
What about the third angel? When does it arrive?
We're not there yet.
Sorry.
That's okay. We're not there yet. I'm trying to figure out where I left off here. So when they land, that signifies their empowerment. In the same way, when the second angel arrived in history, the first stage was the arrival. When the second angel arrived in history, the first stage was the arrival in the summer of 1844. And the second stage was the empowerment by Samuel Snow's Midnight Cry on August 14th, 1844. So keep in mind an important distinction. This is how the second angel's message arrived for the Millerite line. For the line of the 144,000, the second angel arrives at 9/11 and is empowered at the Sunday Law. Now, one has to juggle an entirely different concept, which can become confusing. Ellen White also says the second angel's message is empowered at the end of the world at the Sunday Law Waymark. Let's see. The second angel's message is empowered at the end of the world at the Sunday Law Waymark. So please keep in mind two different models, both advocated by Ellen White. In one model, the second angel's message is empowered under the Midnight Cry message of Samuel Snow on August 14th, 1844. And in a different model, she says it repeats at the end of the world, which it is empowered at the Sunday Law Waymark described in Revelation 18. So you're seeing the second angel arrive in the Millerite history and then empowered. And then you're seeing in our history, the line of 144,000, you're seeing the arrival of the second angel and then it's empowered. So using Alpha and Omega parable methodology, if the second angel's message was given to the Millerites in two stages, then that is how it will be given at the end of the world when it is repeated. So we would get it in two stages. We compare the similarities of the beginning of modern Israel, Millerite history, with the end of modern Israel, the 144,000. Thus, at the end of the world, when the second angel's message is repeated in Revelation 18, it will come in two stages. Arrival, when it's flying in the midst of heaven, and empowerment when it comes to the ground. Arrival at 9/11 and empowered at Sunday Law. Essentially, when it is empowered at the end of the world, Revelation 18, it first has to arrive. This can be confusing because using the spirit of prophecy alone, we can also correctly teach that the second angel's message arrived in history in the summer of 1844. Yet using the above Alpha and Omega parable methodology, we are also claiming it has to arrive again before it is repeated or empowered at the end of the world. Does everybody follow that so far? Had Christ returned, we wouldn't be repeating it. If I follow that correctly, we'll read his notes in a minute. So you have an arrival of the second angel, and then you have an empowerment. In 1850, we know, is when the message was to go to the world, which lines up with Sunday law when the message goes to the world. So you have the second angel arrive, and then the second angel empowered. I think I wanted, because she put the summer of 1844 as opposed to here. So definitely we need to check that out. Okay. So using alpha and omega parable methodology, I think I get that part, but does everybody get this paragraph? The understanding that you have an arrival and an empowerment in the Millerite history, and the history is repeated. So you have an arrival and an empowerment in our history. But what she says, we're here where it can be confusing, because using the spirit of prophecy alone, we can also correctly teach that the second angel's message arrived in history in the summer of 1844, as opposed to August 11th, 1840. Yet using the above alpha and omega parable methodology, we are also claiming it has to arrive again before it is repeated or empowered at the end of the world. So the first stage, the arrival, which we have also conceptualized as flying in the midst of heaven. So the arrival is when it's flying in heaven, is not mentioned in Revelation 18. The narrative of Revelation 18 starts after the angel is flying, when it has landed on earth. It can only be discovered using alpha and omega parable methodology. And we will see how this occurred at 9/11. Again, if we understand the empowerment of the second angel, which is Revelation 18, being at the Sunday law, then 9/11 is just the arrival of that angel. Perhaps we could call this a precursor to Revelation 18, while the angel is waiting until it can come down to earth at the Sunday law. So a precursor, so there's, in our history, you would repeat the arrival and the empowerment, that the Millerites had an arrival and an empowerment. As we have mentioned, the angel of Revelation 18 gives the loud cry under the latter rain. So we can understand how both the latter rain and the angel of Revelation 18, and that's what was back in that other paragraph that I was questioning, what I was asking. So what he was comparing. He's comparing the latter rain and the angel of Revelation 18 are synonymous. So the latter rain is the angel of Revelation 18, that they represent the same event, which follows this two-stage pattern. Thus, the latter rain message, synonymous with the message of the angel of Revelation 18, comes in two parts: the arrival or precursor at 9/11 and the empowerment at the Sunday law waymark. Any questions? Going to have to start calling on names to see that we're understanding. So what can be difficult to grasp is that two different but closely related concepts coincide at 9/11. One is that the early rain falls at the arrival at the second angel's message for the 144,000, and two, there is a precursor to the latter rain when the angel of Revelation 18 is flying in the midst of heaven. So the early rain falls at the arrival of the second angel's message, and we've already seen that's 9/11. And there is a precursor to the latter rain, something that comes first, when the angel of Revelation 18 is flying in the midst of heaven. In fact, the arrival of our second angel at 9/11 is exactly the same event as the arrival of, or precursor to, the repeat of the second angel's message prophesied by Ellen White in Revelation 18. Our former rain marks the same event as the precursor to the latter rain. our former rain marks the same event. So the former rain marks 9/11, and the precursor to the latter rain is 9/11. Is that what you guys are understanding?
Well, the precursor is the 9/11, which is the harbinger of what's to come after the Sunday law or close of probation, right? The second part of the third woe.
If that was a question, I had turned my volume up because you were really low. And I missed the first part.
So the former rain marks the same event. So the former rain marks the same event, so it's 9/11, which is the precursor to the latter rain. So 9/11 is the harbinger of what's to come as the latter rain.
Yeah, I think I know what you're saying. Not to be confused with, so I don't know if that's the right way to say it or not, not to be confused with the harbinger of what is let loose at the close of probation. Does that make sense?
All right.
So I think for my own self, just because I know I need to understand it better, the harbinger reference is used in the context of them being fully released at the time that's marked in the spirit of prophecy as where there's where it's a close of probation, that he that is unjust, let him be unjust still. So I think what you're saying is correct. I just when it comes to the word harbinger, maybe it to me, the harbinger word applies to using 9/11 when it comes using the, what would you say, line? It's like another story. Does that make sense? It's another story.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I was looking at the word precursor.
Yeah, I know. It does make it confusing. So in this story, you're looking at the arrival and the empowerment of the second angel, and being at 9/11 and Sunday law, and in using the word harbinger, and I'm not saying it can't be, but it have to fit the particular story, but in using the word harbinger as it's been used in the movement, it's saying that 9/11, which is the third woe, so different story, not the latter rain, but the third woe, that 9/11 is a harbinger when the four winds are completely loosed at the close of at the close of probation. So I guess that's the way to describe it. Two different stories, depending on your
Right.
story, right?
Right. Yeah. You're right. It's two different stories.
Okay. So the arrival of our second angel at 9/11 is the same event as the rival or precursor to the repeat of the second angel's message prophesied by Ellen White in Revelation 18. So our former rain is here, marks the same event as the precursor to the latter rain, and this is the latter rain. So our former rain marks the same event, 9/11, which is the precursor to the latter rain. Alpha and Omega parable methodology shows two stages to the latter rain. We have alleged that the angel of Revelation 18, and therefore the latter rain, so the angel and the angel of Revelation 18 and the latter rain, who said are synonymous, arrives in two stages. So you get the angel, you have the arrival, and then the empowerment. Therefore, the latter rain arrives in two stages. When Ellen White tells us the latter rain falls at the Sunday law, she does not comment on there being a prior stage to it. This can only be derived from alpha and omega parable methodology, hence the understanding of 9/11 is hidden treasure, which only the wise will understand. And that, how do the wise understand that? Anybody have that answer? How do the wise understand that?
Didn't you just say it through
The teaching.
parable methodology?
Say that again.
What you just said through parable methodology.
Yeah, and
Which
what does all this represent?
Line upon line.
Line upon line. Okay, so it's hidden treasure in parable methodology, alpha and omega, line upon line is how we arrive at 9/11. That only the wise would understand. Who are the wise? Where do we find the wise?
Matthew 25. Wise and foolish virgins.
Yeah, I was thinking another verse as well, if anybody knows another one that we use there. Say that again.
Daniel chapter 2, the stone.
Daniel 2, yeah, it is the stone, but in Daniel, where else does it talk about the wise?
Daniel 12.
Daniel 12, yeah. The wise. So exactly like the second angel's message, Ellen White gives us two different applications for rain, both of which come in two parts. So two applications for rain, and both come in two parts. She says at Pentecost, the early rain fell, and at the Sunday law, the latter rain will fall. So she says the rain falls in two parts, early and latter. That's 5T 214.2 and 8T 21.2 and Great Controversy 611.2. So we call this application progression. In reference to John 20:20, she writes, the act of Christ in breathing upon his disciples, the Holy Ghost, and in imparting his peace to them was as a few drops before the plentiful shower to be given on the day of Pentecost. So showing again in two parts, few drops, and that's like the Deuteronomy 32:2 that we saw as well, a few drops, and then the showers. And that's Spirit of Prophecy, Volume 3, 243, paragraph 1. Here we see that the outpouring at Pentecost was preceded by a few drops on Resurrection Day. Also two parts, preceded by a few drops on Resurrection Day, also two parts. Ellen White's two applications are represented as model 1 in blue in the diagram below. So Ellen White's two applications, you have Resurrection Day, Pentecost, early rain, and progression to the latter rain. Two applications are represented. So the early, which is the few drops before you have the few drops before the plentiful shower. Few drops here, plentiful shower. I better make sure I got that straight. So is he I'm trying to figure out, is he depicting, I might be confused here, so you guys help me out if I am confused. You got a few drops here and the plentiful shower, but you have the early rain and you have the latter rain. So is this the repeating at the end? Is that what he's doing here?
Well, he said the early rain was in two parts.
The early rain's in two parts.
That's what he said.
Okay, let me back up then. The early rain fell, and at the Sunday law, the latter rain fell. Where do we see the early rain comes in two parts? How far back was that where we read that? Okay, here we go. The early rain falls at the arrival of the second angel's message, which is the precursor to the latter rain. Did I read that somewhere that the early rain is in 2 parts? And missed it?
I don't know. I thought I heard it, but I'm not seeing it.
Well, I think the rain is in two parts, early rain and latter rain.
Yeah,
I don't remember reading where each of those has 2 parts, therefore 4 parts.
okay, that probably,
Because right there on number 1, number 1 above, yeah, it says, she says at Pentecost, what do you got? Okay, number 1? Oh, no. Number 1, yeah, there you go, that one, number, yeah. She says at Pentecost, the early rain fell and the Sunday law, the latter rain fell. So this early rain and then the latter rain, the Sunday law. And it says, so she says, the rain falls in 2 parts,
right.
early rain and latter rain.
Sorry about that crazy highlighting. I don't know why it did that. Okay. Sorry, Phil. Okay, so yeah, she says the rain falls in 2 parts, early and latter, but not that the early rain. I didn't think it said that, but maybe I missed something what I read. So the rain falls in 2 parts, early rain and latter rain. So you come down here and you've got a few drops in the plentiful shower. So, okay, so he's got alpha. That's what this is. You've got the alpha and the omega. So model 2, let's see. We'll read what that is in just a minute. Yeah, I'm still confused a little bit here with the few drops being here and then this being the early rain. So we'll proceed and see how we do. Okay, model 2 in red reveals how alpha and omega parable methodology shows the latter rain falls at the end of the world in 2 parts. We could equally call this repeat and enlarge parable methodology. The missing first part is not mentioned in inspiration. It can only be derived, that's this part, the missing first part. So if I'm following, this would,
Okay,
this
so-
would be the Millerite history and this would be our history. Is that correct?
On page 2, the title of one of them says,
The
the
price.
parable methodology shows 2 stages to the latter rain.
Yeah, where are you at? I'm on page 2.
Yeah, it's at the top of the page. On page 2.
This is page 2.
Or page 3, I'm sorry, page 3. There, maybe that's where I saw it. Only it was the latter rain. It shows 2 stages to the latter rain.
Yeah, an early and a latter is what it, I'm pretty sure that's what he means. The latter rain is broken up into 2 parts. That probably sounds confusing because you would think that there's 2 parts to the latter rain and 2 parts to the early rain. Let's see, parable methodology shows 2 stages to the latter rain. So the latter rain is one big event, but it's broken up into two parts. The dew that first comes down, so it's all rain. And I think he said that. Go ahead. Say something. Say that again. Okay. So we can clear that up with him, but I'm pretty sure that what he's referring to is that the rain itself, because it says it down below too, that the rain falls in 2 parts. So there's 2 stages to the latter rain, an early and a latter. So we have alleged that the angel of Revelation 18 and therefore the latter rain, the angel of Revelation 18 and the latter rain arrives in 2 stages, then in an early rain and a latter rain. When Ellen White tells us the latter rain falls at the Sunday law, she doesn't comment on there being a prior stage to it. This can only be derived from alpha and omega parable methodology. Hence the understanding of 9/11 is hidden treasure, only the wise will understand. Exactly like the second angel's message, Ellen White gives us two different applications for rain, both of which comes in two parts. So she gives us two applications for rain, and the rain comes in two parts. So we saw that in Pentecost, you had the early rain, and the Sunday law, the latter rain. So she says the rain comes in two parts. I think that's all she's saying. Christine, what do you think?
No idea.
Huh?
I don't know.
Anybody else comment there? Yeah, I don't think that what he's saying, I know it's worded that way here, but I don't think that what he's saying is that the early rain comes in two parts and the latter rain comes apart in two parts. It's the rain that comes in two parts, two stages. So there's two stages to the latter rain. There's a precursor, an early rain, and then the latter rain. So two stages of the rain, an early rain and the latter rain. Okay, so model 2 above in red reveals how alpha and omega parable methodology shows the latter rain falls at the end of the world. This would be the end of the world in two parts. You're going to have a few drops and a plentiful shower. We could equally call this repeat and enlarge parable methodology. The missing first part here is not mentioned in inspiration. It can only be derived from alpha and omega parable methodology. Only when we understand history repeats can we understand that the history of ancient Israel depicted in model 2 is an example written for our admonition upon whom the ends of the world are come. 1 Corinthians 10:11. Then we can see the necessity of identifying the precursor to the latter rain at the end of the world. So she gives us the two parts, and we know where she marks them in two different models, where she marks the few drops and then the plentiful showers, and that's the alpha history. So you come to the omega history, and we don't have a date for this, but we're using repeat and enlarge in alpha and omega parable methodology. So if there's a plentiful shower at the Sunday law, then we know that there's going to be a few drops come first. Did that make sense?
It looks to me like he's showing like a repeat and enlarge. So in Ellen White's day, there was an early rain and a latter rain. And in our day, there's an early rain and a latter rain. But the Millerite history is also an early rain for us. And then our history is a latter rain. If that makes sense.
Yes. Yes. If you, oh, you mean if you took it from 1798 all the way to the end?
Yes.
That the Millerite history is the early rain, and you're saying our history is the latter rain.
In one perspective, but in each of, if you overlap them together, but in each of them, there's an early rain and a latter rain. In our history, there's an early rain and latter rain in our history. But putting the two together, the Millerite history is the early rain, and our history is the latter rain. That's the way this picture, this graph looks
The progression. You're talking about the progression.
on the progression line.
Okay.
Yes.
Anybody else? Okay. Okay, so Ellen White gives us the model of progression in her writings, but parable methodology incorporates her writings into a repeat and enlarge model to discover a hidden waymark we have been calling a precursor. We've already alleged that the waymark, illustrated with a question mark above, is 9/11. I'm going to make that a little smaller for a minute. Won't be able to do it very long. So we've already alleged that the waymark illustrated with a question mark above is 9/11, while the loud cry is a warning to the world of the close of probation. 9/11 was a warning to the church, the 144,000. The church has to be warned first so they can prepare to then warn the world. First the church, then the world. So this is 9/11, first the church, then the world.
So looking at that graph, you see what I mean? Because like on theirs where you would think it would be the latter rain, it's showing the early rain. Now that creates that progression. If they're putting the Millerite history and our history the same. Or is this all just the Millerite history?
Well,
Or it has to be both because it shows the alpha and omega.
yeah, because he's got the, let's see, model 2 in red reveals the alpha and omega parable methodology, shows the latter rain falls at the end of the world in 2 parts. He's not really marking it as Millerite, but it's the omega, it's the alpha, and this is the end, which is omega. If I'm following what you're saying.
Yeah, like the progression line, there's the early rain in the Millerite history,
Right.
and the latter rain in our history. But when you break them up in fractals, the Millerite history has the early rain and latter rain, and our history has the early rain and latter rain.
Right. Or if it's one big line from 1798 till the end of the world, you're saying they are the former rain or early rain, and then it's progression to the latter rain.
That's the way this graph looks.
So that they were the early rain and we're the latter rain.
Because he has the ER in their time, in
Right.
that spot where it would have been their latter rain
Right.
if Christ had come.
Okay. Any questions? Or any more thoughts on that? Anybody? Okay. The relationship between our second angel's message and the repeat of the second angel's message at the end of the world. This precursor, our second angel's message, and the repeat of the second angel's message at the end of the world. Okay, so our second angel's message, I don't know why it's doing that. What's our second angel's message? Waymark.
9/11.
9/11, and the repeat of the second angel's message at the end of the world. I think that's where he's going to go into this progression maybe. So you have this, our second angel's message is 9/11, and the repeat of the second angel's message at the end of the world, which is going to be Revelation 18. Revelation 18. So this precursor, so this one's the precursor, and then this one's the message at the end of the world. The second angel at the message of the Revelation, angel of Revelation 18 at the end of the world, which she marks at Sunday law. So this precursor to the latter rain of Revelation 18 can only be placed at 9/11. 9/11 is the only waymark before the Sunday law on the line of 144,000, apart from 1989, which, as the plowing and the very beginning of the unsealing, cannot also be the beginning of the latter rain. Ellen White said the latter rain of Revelation 18 is the repeat of the second angel at the end of the world. So that's the progression you're talking about, that it's the, let me read that again. The latter rain of Revelation 18, which she marks at Sunday law, is the repeat of the second angel at the end of the world. And we have shown it perfectly complements the arrival of the second angel's message for the 144,000. So the arrival is 9/11 for the 144,000. It is not a coincidence that the arrival or precursor to the repeat, Revelation 18, the second angel's message, so the precursor 9/11 to the repeat, Revelation 18, is the same waymark as the arrival of the second angel's message for the 144,000. Let me see that again. It is not a coincidence that the arrival or precursor to the repeat of the second angel's message, Revelation 18, is the same waymark as the arrival of the second angel's message for the 144,000. It is also no coincidence that this precursor to the latter rain is the same waymark as the early rain for the 144,000. In other words, the few drops of the latter rain is the early rain for the 144,000. Do you mind if we go through that paragraph again?
Yeah, let's break that down, please.
Okay. So the precursor to the latter rain of Revelation 18, 9/11, and Sunday law can only be placed at 9/11. So the precursor can only be placed at 9/11. I get that part. 9/11 is the only waymark before the Sunday law on the line of 144,000, apart from 1989. And we've already shown how we mark 9/11 as that second waymark. We've already shown the agricultural model, knowing that at the time of the end begins the plowing. So it can only be placed at the precursor can only be placed at 9/11. Because 1989 is the plowing. So Ellen White said the latter rain of Revelation 18 is the repeat of the second angel at the end of the world. And we have shown how it perfectly complements the arrival of the second angel's message for the 144,000. It is not a coincidence that the arrival precursor, which is 9/11, to the repeat, which is Revelation 18. This is where I get confused because it says it's the same waymark as the arrival of the second angel's message for the 144,000, because the arrival is 9/11. So I'm having a hard time separating this out. It is not a coincidence that the arrival or the precursor, which I think if we just followed this through, is 9/11, correct?
So far, yes.
To the repeat of the second angel's message. And I think he's referring back to, with her writings, the repeating of the second angel's message is the same waymark. So the precursor and the repeating of the second angel's message, okay, is all the arrival, is the same waymark as the arrival of the second angel's message of 144,000. Okay, so this is not Sunday law. This is not talking about Sunday law here, which is what I was reading it as. So the arrival or precursor to the repeating of the second angel's message, when she says it's going to be repeated at the end of the world, it also then comes in two parts. There's a precursor to it, and the precursor, this is the repeating of the second angel's message, which comes in two parts. And so it's the same waymark as the arrival of the second angel's message for the 144,000, which is 9/11. It is also no coincidence that this precursor to the latter rain is the same waymark as the early rain for the 144,000. Precursor is the same waymark as the early rain for the 144,000. So it's all lining up to 9/11. In other words, the few drops at 9/11 of the latter rain is the early rain for the 144,000. Okay. So break it down as he's got it a little more filled in here. So you have, this would be the Millerites here now. You have it arrives the summer of 1844, and then it's empowered at the midnight cry when Samuel Snow gives the message. So the arrival of the second angel in the summer, and the empowerment here, August 14th. So it arrives in history, Revelation 14:8, flying in the midst of heaven. Okay, but then you have this progression. And you see an empowerment at the Sunday law. So you have to have it in two steps. If you had it in two steps here, you have to have it in two steps here. I think this doesn't, I understand this. It just confuses me in this particular model, if that makes sense, to bring it in. But I'm pretty sure that have you, those of you in class with him, have you gone over this with him, Christine?
I have not.
Okay.
So the question mark before the Sunday law, that I'm thinking that's 9/11, right? With 9/11, that the arrival of the second angel is, so that's 9/11. I'm thinking, am I correct?
Here, yeah. 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 It's just a piece that's missing in my mind mentally. And that's this here. Unless that's just depicting one big line from 1798 to the end of the world, where she says it's repeated. I think that's the confusing thing, because she's giving, if I follow correctly, she's giving, and from what I remember of previous studies, because I think it hinges as well on the fact that Christ didn't come in 1863. So then she talks about it being repeated at the end of the world. So the Millerites, if I understand correctly here, are the former reign. And then it comes to the end of the world and you have the latter reign. But when you cut the line, then you bring one underneath the other. And that's why you have an arrival and empowerment in their history and an arrival and empowerment in our history. So the second angel's message comes in two parts. There's one part and the second part, or there's one part and the second part. Does that make sense? Christine?
It does to me, this graph.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, so progression versus repeat and enlarge. Because on the line of progression, you don't cut the line. So we're looking at progression, and then a repeat and enlarge is where you cut the line. So you don't use progression when you cut a line. Progression, if I'm saying that right, there's progression, tells you one, gives you one perspective. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Maybe somebody can say it better than I can. But you don't mix the two. If trying to remember exactly how it's phrased, but you don't mix the two. Maybe he's going to say it. So progression versus repeat and enlarge. Apart from the second angel's message and reign, so this is progression, and this are repeat and enlarge. Apart from the second angel's message and reign, there are two other models in scripture which follow the same progression as well as repeat and enlarge pattern, one of which is the parable of the 10 virgins. There is a beginning and it travels through time progressively, but it also repeats at the end. So the parable of the 10 virgins, there's a beginning and it travels through time progressively. There's a beginning and it travels through time progressively, but it also repeats at the end. So one would be progression. And then where it repeats at the end, you cut your line and you bring this history under this history. So two separate, a different model talking about progression. Okay, so there is a beginning and it travels through time progressively, but it also repeats at the end. And when it repeats, it does so in the same fashion as it was given at the beginning. So in the omega, the alpha is repeated. We will not take the time here to investigate the parable of the 10 virgins, as we will do so in the next article. The other model, which repeats at the end of the world in two parts, is the process of judgment. So we see the reign in two parts. We see it using progression, arriving to the empowerment, or we see, what was I going to say? The repeat and enlarge. And so then you're going to see another model that does this, because he says there's two models. The other model is the judgment coming. Who knows the model of the judgment? Just the two early rain comes in two stages. The two stages of the judgment. What are the two stages of the judgment?
Investigative.
Investigative and executive.
Yeah. Yeah, judgment of the, somebody else I think might have said it. David, did you say it as well? Phil said it right too. There was another way to say it.
Yeah, I was saying what he said.
Okay. So the investigative and the executive, or the judgment of the dead,
Dead,
the judgment
then the
of the living and the judgment of the dead. Is that what you're saying, Christine?
Yeah, the judgment of the dead comes first, right?
The dead comes, and I said it backwards. The dead come, judgment of the dead, and then the judgment of the living. Okay, so the judgment of the living and the sealing of the 144,000. We've demonstrated how 1844 can be lined up with 9/11 using the arrival of the second angel's message. But 1844 also saw the arrival of the third angel's message on October 23rd with the message of the law in the most holy place. We will look at this further in the next and final article, but for now, let us just point out that we can take the prophetic properties from 1844 and parallel them with our prophetic events at 9/11. The first angel's message from 1798 was particularly, the hour of his judgment is come. So that's the first angel's message, 1798, the hour of his judgment is come. This judgment is the judgment of the dead beginning October 22nd, 1844. From the 2300-day prophecy, Daniel 8:13, Miller was supposed to predict that Christ was to move from the holy to the most holy to begin the investigative judgment of the dead. The announcement, the hour of his judgment is come, points to the closing work of Christ's ministration for the salvation of men. The error he made was to predict an executive judgment, that being the second advent. As we can take the prophetic properties from 1844 and parallel them with the prophetic events at 9/11, we can place judgment at 9/11 in parallel. If the judgment of the dead was 1844, then it can only be that the judgment of the living was 9/11. I think I need to see the properties of the dead, but how that lines up. Anybody want to tackle that?
I don't understand the question.
That's okay. I think he's going to go on and explain that here a little bit. So we're taking so we've demonstrated how 1844 can be lined up with 9/11 using the arrival of the second angel's message. Okay, 1844, the arrival of the second angel's message, by what she talks about with the Sunday law waymark, I believe. So, but 1844 saw the arrival of the third angel's message on October 23rd with the message of the law of the law in the most holy place. We will look at this further. Okay, next time. Okay, but we can take the prophetic properties and meaning the characteristic or property of 1844 and parallel that with prophetic events of 9/11. The first angel's message, the hour of his judgment is come. The judgment of the dead, October 22nd, 1844. Okay. And this is Miller predicting the 2300-day prophecy. Closing, it would close, and he was pronouncing a executive judgment, which belongs at the close of probation, at the second advent, not on October 22nd. Okay, so the announcement, the hour of his judgment has come, points to the closing work of Christ's ministration for the salvation of men. So the error he made was to predict an executive judgment, and that being the second advent. Okay, so as we can take the prophetic properties from 1844 and parallel them with the prophetic events at 9/11, we can take, and I think he's doing this using the reign and the arrival and the repeating of the second angel's message and what she says about the end of the world, marking Revelation 18 being the Sunday law. We can place at 9/11 in parallel. If the judgment of the dead was 1844, then it can only be that the judgment of the living was at 9/11. So I'm still not quite making myself getting that connection. Yet we face the same dilemma as we have in the rest of this article. Ellen White places the judgment of the living firmly at the Sunday law waymark. So she places the judgment of the living at the Sunday law waymark. However, as the 144,000, we use parable methodology. As we have seen, one type of parable is Alpha and Omega. And as with rain and the second angel's message, we can see there has to be a precursor or first stage to these events. Just as the aforementioned come in two parts, the rain and the second angel's message comes in two parts, so too does the judgment of the living. And as with the others, Ellen White only gives us the second part. So the rain, the second angel's message, and the judgment of the living. She's marking those three, and that was at the beginning of the document as well. She's marking those three at the Sunday law. But like with the rain and the second angel's message, there's a precursor. There's an early rain, because she places the latter rain at the Sunday law, the second angel's message repeating at the Sunday law, and the judgment of the living at the Sunday law. There's a precursor or early rain. There's a precursor or arrival of the second angel. So there's a precursor to the judgment of the living. And as with the others, Ellen White only gives us the second part. And that second part is the Sunday law. Any comments on that? Are we following that? Remember, the more we talk it out and repeat it back, the more it sticks in our mind, or we find our mistakes as we open our mouth, like I often do. Anybody? So we're on page 5. I'm going to back up real quick. Yeah, right here. Ellen White tells us that the latter rain, the judgment of the living, and the sealing of the 144,000 all take place at the Sunday law waymark. And so that's where what we're looking at. Okay. Okay. So she only gives us the second part, just like we saw on the graph here. She gives us the second part, Sunday law. In the model of judgment, we think of Adam and Eve, and Abel is being judged first. The investigative judgment, beginning in 1844, is when the books of the dead are opened and investigated. Logically, then, these books must have first been written. So October 22nd, 1844 would be the second stage of the judgment of the dead. So the books were written, that's the first stage. And the, let's see. Let me make sure I said that right. So the investigative judgment begins in beginning in 1844 is when the books of the dead are opened and investigated. So they're investigated, but they first must have been written, because unless they were written, there was nothing to investigate. So the judgment of the dead is in two parts: the writing of it, and then the investigation. Because you can't investigate what's not already written. Logically, these books must have first been written. October 22nd, 1844 would be the second stage of the judgment of the dead. So it was first written, and then it's opened up, investigated. The first stage would have been to write these books, just as a detective gathers and records evidence during the investigation of a suspect. We would call it record keeping or note taking. Scriptural evidence for this is that Abel is already declared righteous in the Bible. long before 1844. Matthew 23:35 and Hebrews 11:4. So righteous is declared, Abel is declared righteous long before 1844. The reason Jesus knows Abel was found righteous is no doubt because Abel's record is already in the public domain, that being his prophetic test in the book of Genesis. Please notice that Cain and Abel were given a great test by which their eternal destiny will be decided. 2 Selected Messages 80, paragraph 4. It was a prophetic test in that the sacrifice required was a prophecy of the Messiah, but inextricably linked to that test was a revelation of what was already in their hearts. So it's a prophetic test in that the sacrifice required was a prophecy of the Messiah. It's linked to that test was a revelation of what was already in their hearts. Thus, at 9/11, the recording angels begin their work of record keeping, recording the responses to each prophetic test of those that strive to be among the 144,000. It cannot be before 9/11, as the symbol of baptism at 9/11 represents being born again. Record keeping cannot occur before one is born, still in the womb. Likewise, in the agricultural model, the wheat is only planted at 9/11, so it ceases to exist before then. Only when it receives the early rain and springs up can it be investigated as to whether it is a wheat or a tare. We also have seen that from 9/11, God has proven and confirmed his message, movement, and methodology. We prove the methodology that proves the movement, and it's his message, and that he does not waste his efforts. He requires a response from us to accept the ensuing doctrines one by one as they come to light. From 9/11, God can fairly and justly demand of us an affirmative response to the third woe, the 2520, the 126, time setting, the repeat of Raphi and Panium, the midnight cry, and equality. So as we progress through these tests, he can fairly and justly demand of us an affirmative response to each of these things, the steps that we've all walked through, each being part of our prophetic test along the way. Then at the Sunday law waymark, the judgment of the living moves to its second stage when the records are investigated. As with the other prophetic models, Ellen White only comments on the second stage. It is only through Alpha and Omega parable methodology that one can uncover the hidden treasure or of the precursor or note-taking at 9/11. So the recording begins, note-taking begins as we continue on our journey and we pass all these different tests, and God can fairly justly demand us an affirmative from us an affirmative response. In accepting the third woe is 9/11, accepting the 2520, accepting the 126, which is time setting, accepting the repeat of Raphi and Panium from Daniel 11, and the midnight cry and equality. So the Sunday law, that judgment goes into its second stage, where the investigation begins off of what has been recorded. The book was written, and now it's going to be investigated. So as each of the 144,000 progress through the prophetic doctrines, which arrive in their order, which we just listed, they are being progressively sealed as they accept each one. While these are emphatically not moral sins or moral tests, it is my belief that our moral characters are tried to some extent by these prophetic messages. Pride and prejudice, for example, can prevent us from accepting the messenger and therefore their message. So while we are being judged by our God-given prophetic tests, undoubtedly they reveal our moral character too. Then as we pass each test, we are being sealed progressively. That line of progression. Doctrine by doctrine, as we settle into these truths, both intellectually and spiritually, Tim MR 252, paragraph 1. If you remember from the first article, the sealing of the 144,000 is recorded in Revelation 7:1-8, where we also see the four winds restrained, representing the sealing of the 144,000 from the Sunday law to the close of probation, Daniel 12:1. So at the Sunday law waymark, the great test for the people of God, the second stage of the investigative judgment begins when the books can be investigated and the sealing angel can identify those who are safe to seal before Daniel 12:1. By the second advent, we are expected to be restored to Eden, fit to be taken to heaven. So is everybody following that? This is the accepting of the doctrines. What did he mention could cause us to reject a doctrine? Were you going to answer, Mary?
Yeah, I was, pride in rejecting the methodology, rejecting our leaders would cause us to reject anything that is coming out of them, as in these doctrines that we have listed here.
Yeah, he's got, I had it showing still there. Pride and prejudice, for example, this is just one, can prevent us from accepting the messenger. So we can reject the messenger. And when we reject the messenger, if the messenger is sent by God, I always go back to Joshua, where Joshua, the example there, Joshua meets with Christ and Christ instructs him. Joshua takes the message to the people, but he doesn't give them all the details. He gives them what they need. And it's up to them to believe or not. So if you don't believe that God is directing this movement and you reject the messenger, you're rejecting the message. So it's a gradual thing, and you can be walking along this journey and not accept everything. And that's going to be, I don't know if the right way to say it, but at the Sunday law, there's an investigation. And what did it say about Abel? Abel passed his test. How? There's a particular point that was made about Abel passing his test. What does the passing of the test reveal?
Moral character.
Say that again.
His moral character.
Yeah, there's a particular phrase that he used in it too. It's merely revealing what's in your heart. What's already there. Okay. So the sealing and its required manifestation of righteousness at 9/11 perfectly complements the arrival of the second angel's message, which can be represented by the second step, righteousness, in the sanctuary model, Daniel 12:10, Luke 9:23, John 16:8, and Acts 24:25, Revelation 3:18. We're going to have to pull this apart when we go next week and dig into the verses just to go through them as well. a little bit more. So in paralleling baptism 27 AD, when we have to manifest righteousness, Romans 6:6, it is simple that baptism you must manifest righteousness. It is simple logic that under the second angel's message, if one comes out of Babylon, and then they come out of the anti-Christian belief system into God's kingdom, which is akin to exhibiting righteousness. So it is simple logic that under the second angel's message, if you come out of Babylon, then you come out of an anti-Christian belief system into God's kingdom, which is akin to exhibiting righteousness. Conclusion: in this article, using line upon line methodology, we have attempted to show how 9/11 saw the beginning of the early reign for the 144,000 by comparing it to the agricultural model. Simply, both the early reign and 9/11 are the second waymarks of their respective lines. Furthermore, baptism and seed sowing are symbolized here, and the early rain contributes to the growth of the plant, just as one is called to walk perfectly with the Lord after baptism. Again, using line upon line methodology, by comparing and contrasting the line of Adventism with the line of the 144,000, we place the judgment of the living at 9/11. We noted, however, that this and other such events Ellen White places at the Sunday law, namely the latter rain message of Revelation 18 and the sealing of 144,000. However, we saw that by using Alpha and Omega, because she places that at the Sunday law, by using Alpha and Omega parable methodology, their precursors can be placed at the former waymark, 9/11. You'll not find it explicitly in scripture. You have to dig for it using Alpha and Omega parable methodology. Hence the waymark 9/11 is hidden treasure only for the wise at the end of the world. So there's a couple of links here, and that maybe between now and next Wednesday, I think, is when we'll probably do this again. We'll have to verify that. But if we could watch the presentations that are listed here and go back so that we are able to come back to our line of the 144,000 and review these things, so that we're able to be able to repeat back. We want to be able to repeat back the 12 prophetic events, and we're not here yet on the last ones, the 12 prophetic events, the 4 winds being restrained at Islam, and the third woe begin, using the triple application, first woe plus second woe equals third woe. The 4 winds are linked to Islam, and particularly the east wind. And the proofs were there in the scriptures that we went through. We saw Islam restrained on August 11th, 1840. So using the woe, you see there is a hurt and then a killing of Rome's army. So 9/11 represents that hurting, the first woe, hurting. And then Islam is restrained. It lines up with November 9 of 2001. This also confirms the methodology of a day equals year in Bible prophecy, which we took to our line and see that 9/11 confirms using the restraint of Islam and the woes to come to 9/11 and see that line upon line is what brought us to 9/11, our waymark of 9/11, where you see Islam restrained, you see Islam restrained, you see the third woe begin based on the first plus the second. So you see that all line up at 9/11, which confirms the methodology of line upon line. So then we went through the angels, the arrival and the empowerment of the second angel's message. We saw that God enters into a covenant with his people after he proves line upon line, just like in ancient Israel, the Alpha or the Omega of ancient Israel, where God proclaims that this is my son at the baptism, and the leadership is passed by, and he enters into a covenant with a new church. So what we want to be able to do, because I think that you guys are either really, really super quiet or we're not getting it as we need to. So we want to review this one again until we understand it. We know that the early rain dispensation for you have the early rain dispensation for the 144,000. And we know that by the agricultural model is 9/11, that early rain. The precursor to the angel, so the rain comes in two parts. The judgment of the judgment comes in two parts. And the second angel comes in two parts. And Ellen White gives us that these three things arrive at the Sunday law. But we've seen that there's a precursor to the second angel. You have an arrival and an empowerment. We see there's a precursor to the rain. You have a early rain and a latter rain. And you see that with the judgment. You have the writing or note taking, and then the investigation. So let's see. I think I covered most of that. So what we want to review that again next week. And I just recommend that we sometime during the week, and these are in your notes that I emailed out, sometime during the week, we check out these videos so that we can come back and do a review. Anybody want to try to do a little bit of a review right now? I'm going to guess that the silence means that we're still not getting it. Is that correct?
For me, it's not solid. Go
Yeah.
ahead, Phil. And Mary, somebody was going to talk.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Were you going to say more, Phil?
Yeah, it's not hitting on all 8 cylinders.
Okay. Okay. And Mary?
There's some things that are not clear in as far as the two parts of the rain, the early rain coming into two parts, the latter rain coming into two parts.
Uh-huh.
That latter rain is not clicking yet.
The rain coming in two parts?
Yeah, especially the latter rain coming into two parts. I just want to see
So
the
the latter rain doesn't come in two parts. The rain comes in two parts. An early and a latter rain. And I know that might be confusing because that one spot that he did say it that Christine found was pulled out, pointed out. Where was it? Right here. Alpha and Omega parable methodology. So it's 2 stages to the latter rain. So I think it's just an umbrella term, the latter rain, because she places the latter rain at the Sunday law. But in order to have a latter rain, you must first have an early rain. If you take the line of the agricultural model, you're the farmer and you're growing your crop, you're going to first plow the ground, then you're going to plant the seed, and you get the early rain that what's the word? Not sprout. Sprout's not the word I'm looking for, but maybe you know what I'm talking about. That there's a word and I can't think of it right now. But
Seedling?
Huh?
Like a seedling?
No, there's a word that I'm looking for. It's close to
Germination.
Yes, germination. That's the one I'm looking for. Yeah, for it to germinate. Thank you. So the former rain comes down and the soil is prepared for the seed to then germinate. And then the latter rain, what does she say about the latter rain? What does the latter rain do?
it ripens the crop.
Right, it ripens the crop. So if you're growing your corn, you're going to first plow your ground. You're going to then plant your seed. There's a rain that the soil is prepared and the seed will germinate. And then the latter rain comes just before harvest, because that latter rain will ripen the harvest. will ripen the crop just before harvest. So that's the farming way to the agricultural way to look at it. That I know that just in the times that I didn't do it this year or last year, but plant gardens, it's always nice to see when you plant your garden, you plant your seeds and guess what comes sometime soon after? You get some rain showers that come down. And I always like to think of that with this agricultural model, that it's helping to germinate your seeds for growth. But at the end, you get a latter rain, which ripens that harvest. So it's the rain itself that comes in two parts. But she talks about the latter rain, and she talks about it coming at the Sunday law. So her quotes are what gives us that the latter rain comes at Sunday law. And so if the latter rain comes at Sunday law, and you take this agricultural model, what does the agricultural model tell us? That the rain is in two parts. Did that help?
Yeah, I was just looking also at where she talked about the few drops before Pentecost.
Right.
So
Right. And that would be the early rain.
the few drops would be the early rain.
Right. That'd be the early rain. That would prepare them for the latter rain. So she gives us the latter rain, the judgment, and the sealing. I think that's what it said. And I'm drawing a blank real quick. Go back up here. Yeah, the latter rain, the judgment, and the judgment of the living, and the sealing. She gives us those and places them out the Sunday law. So you have the latter rain, the judgment of the living, and the sealing of the 144,000. They're all marked at the Sunday law waymark. But what this whole study is telling us is going through is showing us that the latter rain has an early rain. The judgment of the living has the note-taking process that has to happen first, because you can't investigate what isn't first in the books. And then the sealing of the 144,000 beginning at 9/11. But she marks all these things. So we're seeing a precursor. And then also on the, let me see if there's the other one. Maybe that was the last one. So then what we also looked at, which didn't go into entirely, is the difference between repeat and enlarge. This is a repeat and enlarge, and the line of progression. The line of progression would suggest that this history is the early rain. And I think that's what Christine was noting. Yeah, early rain. So that this history is the early rain, and then it's progressively here to the latter rain. And she marks the Sunday law as that latter rain, or as that plentiful shower before the few drops. Okay.
I guess I was getting confused by that. Can you go up a little bit?
Here, yeah.
And no, the other one where we have the resurrection and that model there.
Okay.
Resurrection day, few drops. So that resurrection day is not 9/11.
No. No.
'Cause that's in the Millerite history, so that's 1844.
That's the line of Christ, the one on
Yeah,
top.
this one's the line of Christ.
Sure.
Yeah.
So in the line of Christ, that resurrection day is not 27 AD. It is after the cross. Then we have the Pentecost there.
Right.
So we have few drops. Then the plentiful showers there at Pentecost.
Right.
We have those two parts.
Two parts. Or progressively early rain to the end, the latter rain, Sunday law. I think I still have a little bit of confusion just on this top line, but I get it better when you look. I get it better thinking about it on this bottom line. But it's giving us the, from from her references in Acts of the Apostles, there were several references where she gave it, where it's what gives us the few drops and then the plentiful showers. So we have so we would take the few drops and the plentiful showers and carry that down to the Millerite history, or if it were going to be the whole one big line, two different models. So in the Millerite history, you had the few drops, and then you had the plentiful shower. That's the alpha history. So if there's an early rain and a latter rain in the alpha history, then repeat and enlarge. If you were to cut your line and you take this history and put it under here, then you would have to have the few drops and a plentiful shower. But since she marks the Sunday law, go ahead. Who's going to say something? Were you going to say something, Sarah?
So in the line of Christ, where do we put the few drops?
On the line of Christ, where do we put the few drops?
Mm.
She has it in Resurrection Day. The few drops she's marking as Ellen White as Resurrection Day, and Pentecost as the plentiful shower.
Oh, okay.
So you've got the cross back here, and then you've got Resurrection Day. 3 days. You've got Resurrection Day.
Okay.
So,
So,
go ahead.
so this is on the line of Christ. This would be the latter rain, the whole of it. It's not the early rain. It is after the cross. You got the Holy Spirit at the Resurrection Day, and then the outpouring on Pentecostal Day, which is the latter rain, coming in 2 parts.
Yeah, if you think about it, remember where the disciples were at when it came to the cross. They didn't even understand what was happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then he's resurrected. So there's an understanding that comes with that, right? So like a message.
Yeah, I think it's during the 40 days that they received the few drops.
Yeah.
Yeah, after the resurrection, and then we see the Pentecost at the latter rain.
Right.
Mhm.
So, but on a line of progression, Pentecost is the early rain and Sunday law is the latter rain on a line of progression.
Yeah, that's what it's showing.
So we'll go over this again. We'll go over this again next week. So that we
Just-
can, go ahead.
Just to note, I clicked on those 2 videos, and the first one is a broken link to Catherine's video. I researched it and I put the newer link in the chat. So the one for Catherine's video for review of Vow 21-24, the link is in the chat.
Okay. So if we know what title it is, you probably just said all that. My phone rang and it was the second time it was Rebecca, so I told her I'd call her back. Okay, so if you know the title of it, is that the title that she did there? So we can be able to search it on the Midnight Watch. Is that what you said?
Right. I put the new link in there, but
I found it, okay.
yeah.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you. Sorry. Okay. So if we're not, as Phil said, going on all 8 cylinders, are we looking at 2 cylinders, 4 cylinders, or 6 cylinders?
1 or 2.
Oh, 2.
I think 2 for me. I don't know. How about you, Phil? Wait, is this on a 1 to 8 scale or a 1 to 6 scale?
Well, generally, the only way I know is maybe other cars have more than 8 cylinders. I'm thinking 8 cylinders. So
Okay, on a 1 to 8 scale, I'm on a 4. How about you, Phil?
Yeah, I think we just need to, I mean, this is because it's something new that we have to continue just reviewing it.
yeah, I think it's not so much new, but it's not where our focus has been for maybe new, depends on, I guess it depends on each
Some
one.
people,
For some it is probably new. So good that we're doing this. I'm really glad that we wound up doing these reviews because it wasn't a plan. It was
yeah,
so I'm really glad we wound up doing these reviews. Me, it's just keeping it all straight. Like I get it, but to keep it straight in my head, because we want to be able to juggle all 12 events fluently, you know, and so that we're able to defend the waymark of 9/11. Because I know that that's a big one that you get hit at with the Levites. At least that's my experience in the past when it comes to 9/11. But they were completely gone when you got to the 2520. So, but they never understood the repeating of history. And anyway, so we want to be able to fluently do that. So if you have time, as you have time, maybe check out the 2 videos, go through the notes again, and find the key points that help it stick. For me, the key point that helps that stick is the 3 things that he listed that Ellen White places at the Sunday law. And that's the latter rain, which she lines up with the angel of Revelation 18, okay, that they're synonymous. And then the judgment of the living at the Sunday law, and the sealing of the 144,000 at the Sunday law. So what we see in the prior history is what you have with the angels, for instance, you have when they're flying in the midst of heaven, that's their arrival. When they come to the ground, that's their empowerment. Revelation 18 is the empowerment of Revelation 14. So that would mean that there's an arrival and an empowerment. So there's 2 steps to the angels, right? So taking that, I think, if I'm following it correctly myself, but you take that with each one of those things, because you see in the Alpha history, you have 2 parts. When you look at the rain, you see you have 2 parts. The judgment of the living, you have 2 parts. You have the writing, taking the note taking, and you can't investigate what hasn't first been written. And then the one that I still need to get in my head more clearly is I know the verses and stuff that she places the sealing, using Revelation 7 as the sealing, comparing all that, and you link that in with Islam and 9/11, it's all linked together. But the sealing being back at 9/11. So we want to be able to fluently go through these things. So try to keep in your mind and juggle in your mind the first article that went through the Millerite history and Islam being restrained, and the first and second woe being repeated in our history. First woe plus the second woe equals the third woe. So keep that one in mind, and then keep in the angels that we just kind of went through again, the arrivals and the empowerments of the angels. And then this third study where you have the latter rain, the judgment of the living, and the sealing of 144,000, all stated by Ellen White as at the Sunday law. But what we're learning is that there's a precursor to each. So they come in 2 parts. Okay. Anybody else? Who's going to do the review next week? We'll be naming somebody. Okay. Phil, would you like to close us in prayer?
Our wonderful God, we thank you for the opportunity this evening to have met together via Zoom and go over these waymarks that we need to defend and to teach. And so we've come to trying to understand the waymark of 9/11, and there's much to learn. And for some of us, it's new. for those of us who have come in at the later part, we just accepted it as truth, but really didn't understand the whole of the meaning of 9/11, and so we're grateful that we have the opportunity to decipher and to pull things apart and to really try to understand this waymark. And I think we still have a ways to go until we speak this language fluently. But the more we participate, the more we stumble through it, the more we are brave enough to ask questions and answer it. Whether we get it right or wrong is irrelevant. It's the understanding. It's the wisdom. It's the being the wise who understand. So thank you, Lord, for leading us through these studies. And as we continue to contemplate on this throughout this week, and hopefully we'll have the time and make the time to watch the 2 videos to help us to understand even more of it. So when we come back next Wednesday, that we can participate some more and understand more of it, maybe not completely, but at least more of it. And as we continue to study, that like anything else, we need to study and practice to become more fluent in it. So thank you, Lord, for this study, and may you continue to lead us and guide us, our minds throughout this week until we meet again next week. Thank you, Lord. In Yeshua's holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.